Welcome to the Indie LA podcast.
So when they see your name or they see your face, they're going to remember you. Everybody works with everybody. So don't burn bridges, put in the work. And personally, I think it's okay to put your dues in first and then get it back later.
All right, we're here back in the studio with Indie LA Productions, and we have Sarah Mae Agnew with us, actress, screenwriter. Sarah, thank you for being on the podcast with us.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me, guys. Thanks so much.
Yeah, so Sarah, I just want to jump right into it. I know you as pursuing acting. You know, we met like a few years ago. We stayed in a place together in North Hollywood, and you were really like grinding, like coming after like this acting thing. How did you get started into that, and like what influenced you to pursue that?
I got into acting when I was like 7 years old, doing local theater in Michigan. And there's this old theater there. I think it's like the second oldest one in the United States.
Wow.
And one of my friends, their family was big into acting. My family was into sports. I was horrible at sports. So I got dragged along during the auditions, and they asked me to audition on it. And I auditioned, and I couldn't hear myself sing at all. I think I sang Happy Birthday, and I was so shy. And the director asked the pianist, like, do you want to do it again? And she's like, no, it's fine. So since like that defeat and the embarrassment, I'm like, I'm going to be the best at this. I'm going to get way better at this. And throughout my childhood, I learned to sing. I learned to act. I was auditioning more, and I fell in love with it.
Oh, 7 years old. Like, that's pretty young to find a passion.
It's cool that you had that realization at such a young age.
I don't know if I realized that would be my living, but at that time I was going to prove everybody wrong.
Yeah, even it's just that you wanted to take it and run with it. And
oh yeah, I mean, once I actually was able to get over my fears, I absolutely loved it. So it's definitely something I ran with. And then in college, when I was going for broadcasting, I ran into an acting coach out here that worked with me on a monologue I did for an audition, and he liked my style. And he's like, well, if you're going to act and you're going to do this, you got to come out to Hollywood. That's the only place that you can make a living off of acting. So after graduating, because I only had like 2 semesters left, I moved out here 3 months later and pursued acting and worked with him for a little bit, worked with a few other acting coaches. Haven't left since.
Yeah, wow. Mm-hmm. So let's go back to some of your experiences as a young actress. You know, when you're like a kid. What was like a role like for you that you can remember like playing or like practicing, or you know like who did you look up to at such like a young age?
People I looked up to, a lot of the male actors I actually looked up to just because they were getting the roles that I wanted. It wasn't all just the love interest roles. The stereotypical ones that are still around, like Leonardo DiCaprio. If I did have to find a female, it would be like Meryl Streep. I loved her work. Jack Nicholson, I loved his work. And then I'd watch like really old films like Gone with the Wind and like artists around that period of time. Mm-hmm. And anything that I saw, I just kind of absorbed and adapted. And I didn't know at the time, but I also watched a lot of Lucille Ball, and I didn't ever gravitate towards comedy at all. But now when I do comedy and like acting classes, I have every single instructor say like, oh, you're like Lucille Ball. Like that's your style. And so at some point I picked up that style for acting.
Okay. And did you play in plays like when you were younger? Did you perform and that kind of thing?
Oh yeah, several musicals, plays. One of my favorite ones was Rumors. I played Cassie Cooper, and it's not the role I wanted at all. It wasn't like that standard comedy role, but the director just kind of let me like go with it, and I fell in love with that role because I could just be this really she kind of like married into money, and she had some feelings, but she believed into like the crystals, and she believed in naturalistic like healing wise, but still being very Paris Hilton like.
Okay.
In a period piece at that point. And I love that. So I was able to adapt into like the plays more than the musicals itself. And that's where I decided, I'm like, Broadway's not my thing. It's more of movies.
Okay. Interesting.
Do you feel like you're drawn to the more comedic roles?
I find myself getting casted in more comedic roles.
Okay.
I would love the drama roles. I feel like I do best in dramatic roles. However, comedy comes very easy, and there's usually more freedom in the comedy, where dramatic roles, it's all do this take 70 times and it's all the exact same way. In comedy, you can kind of play around with it and play off of your scene partners. So I do enjoy that.
Okay, nice.
Cool. So, you had this this acting coach, you're saying like a mentor of yours suggests Los Angeles, right? They told you like Hollywood was the only place you're going to make money in like this field. I guess like when you came out here after school, like was it everything that you expected it to be? Like did it take some, time to get used to the culture, your surroundings? Like how was it when you first moved out here?
When I first moved out here, it was a culture shock. Like I grew up in a small town. I love my small town. If I could still work today and be in my small town, I would 100% would be there. But for a big city, LA's great. Like I feel more at home in LA than in New York or Chicago or Atlanta. So that fit well. The first 6 months though, like was really, really hard. I was depressed at times. I didn't know anybody. There was 0 people out here I knew other than my acting coach. And he helped me get to know a few other actors that he had brought out here. But it was a rough transition. And eventually I found my footing and like my right groups and getting involved. So now it feels like home.
Yeah.
Now I can easily call it home.
Yeah, you moved out here without knowing anyone really.
Not a soul.
Yeah.
Not a soul.
Did you ever go through that moment where you're like, maybe I should go home? Maybe this isn't it?
Maybe that first week coming out here, like my parents helped me move out and they stayed with me for a week to find an apartment. And as soon as they left, I'm like, oh crap, like this is real. I don't know.
It's happening.
I'm not sure if this is going to stick. And talking later to like my family and friends, they're like, yeah, we honestly thought like a month passed, you're still there. 6 months passed, you're still there. Okay, so I guess like you're probably going to stay there. But there was several times those first 6 months, I'm like, I might move back. I don't know if this is gonna work out.
Well, it sounds like it is working out for you.
Yeah.
It's working out now. I just had to wait. It took a long time, but I just had to wait.
So how important was it for you to build those connections with people? You said that you came out here, the first 6 months were rough, but then you were able to, as you say, meet your people and sort of like your group. Like what was that like? Like tell me about how you met some people that kind of like shaped your career.
I've met some people that have shaped my career, and there's been good influences and bad influences. And I would say there's a lot of people that have been both of those in my journey. First coming out here, you kind of just gravitate towards whatever comes at you very quickly.
Yeah.
Where now I'm more selective and like people that come by and who has an influence on me. Before it would be like, oh, you're an actor or a director or you're in the industry. Like we should link up. We should get to know each other. And that was great. And I got to, like now I know almost everybody in this town, or at least somebody that knows somebody in this town. But when you are that new and that fresh, people will take advantage of you. And when you yearn for that connection so strongly, you don't really realize or see those red flags. And now looking back and like, or once I got my grounding in the city, I could kind of see what their intentions were. And so there were some bad influences that I've had to weed out over the time, but they had their purposes for that moment in my life.
Sure. Were there any particular projects or directions that you felt like when you got here and you didn't really know anyone that you're getting pulled towards, that you're like, oh, I don't think that's really for me. That's not what I came for. There
were several projects. One of my acting coach that had brought me out here, he liked doing these one-man shows often, or workshop shows. And there was some that I wasn't sure if I was ready at that time to do. Like I wouldn't mind doing in my career. There was this one woman show that was about a prostitute.
Okay.
And she was supposed to wear either no clothing or like a lingerie. And then the audience was supposed to be like within 3 feet of me. And I'm performing this. So it's not even for like
Video,
camera.
You're
it's
performing
not for
live right in front of people.
Right. It was like the second showing of that. He did it twice. He did it once with one woman in a hotel room at the Roosevelt. And then he did it once in his studio. And that was when I was casted. And that one, I wasn't sure if that was for me. I kind of was getting like the ick with it. I had done that. And then that led to a few other projects of his. And then at that point, I'm like, I need to back off because I'm not feeling right about these projects. But there was definitely a couple that I probably should have walked away from that I didn't. And now they've helped me. They're great. They're really difficult. It's like learning 50 pages of just you talking and keeping those people captivated. So that's definitely an asset. But at that time, it was a little shady.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, good or bad, it sounds like you learned from those experiences for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, talk to me about how you got into screenwriting because, you know, there's a lot of people pursuing acting. They might take like other avenues, like modeling or something like that, but not a lot of people get into like the creation process of it. So what drew you towards that, and like how have you managed to like remain successful in that field?
I never pictured myself to be a screenwriter. There was stories I wanted to tell, and I was hoping that I would be able to tell those stories as an actor, and then maybe one day way down the road I would end up writing. But I never did that. And then when I went through these acting classes, I met one of my acting coaches that's also a casting director in Hollywood. And she had, for whatever reason, I must have said something or made a note, she thought I was a writer. And so she brought me around some of her meetings before we'd go out and like get lunch. And it was at this one production company in the hills that her assistant didn't show up. She's like, why don't you just sit in, don't say anything, but like just sit in on this meeting and then we'll go and grab lunch after. And while we were sitting there, the producer that she was meeting with was talking and saying that he really wants these books written. He doesn't have time to write these books, and he's swamped with all these scripts he has to write for his production company. And she's like, oh, well, Sarah can write. Like, why don't you just hire her and she'll write for you? And I was not going to make her look like an idiot. And so I'm like, yeah, I can totally write. Absolutely. Like, no problem. Of course. So that very moment, he's like, great. Like, we'll get together. We're going to start writing, and I'll have you write my book here. And then we'll have you start writing like some episodes for my TV show. I'm like, great, sure. And at that point at night, I would Google like standard script writing. What does interior, exterior mean? How do you write this dialogue? And then I would listen to this producer who was like, he made his living off of writing. People know him for writing. So whenever he gave like a hint or like a tip, I would just like jot it down. And then I kind of learned through him because he would read my writing. He's like, okay, this needs to change. Like, you probably just like messed up on accident, but this is what it's supposed to be. And I learned how to script write through that. Then I got my other job later on through that same casting director that recommended me. And eventually I told her, like, you know, I'm not a script writer, right? She had no idea. So I wrote a TV show for her, a talk show for her, another one for one of her other friends. And I kind of just learned as I go.
Yeah. So you kind of just got like called to do it. Somebody was like, oh yeah. And they threw you in the fire and you're just like,
I can't say no. I don't want to make them look like an idiot because I thought at that point she knew I didn't write. She did not. So it worked out.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you have a talent for it, especially if being put in that situation and then doing the work and learning and giving them those things and then continuing to get more work.
Shockingly, it must have been something I was born with. I had no idea I had. Yeah.
Well, do you think that your development as an actress and like your practice and study in that, do you think that any of that was like applicable to you learning how to screenwrite?
Oh, absolutely. Because as I'm writing, I'm first and foremost imagining how would I perform this?
Okay.
And I'll write that out either in directions or in the wording. And then I figure like, okay, so this is how it acted. Well, how would it be shot? So I always say I write as an actor. And I've worked with other writers that write as directors or write as a traditional writer. There are a lot of actors that write, but very few writers I work with are actors. So it's a very different technique, but I know how to get into the voices of those characters. Probably easier than other people that have not acted.
Yeah. So having experience like in the field, you know, like on the ground is helped you like develop that skill a little bit, you'd say.
Oh, absolutely.
Can you tell us a little bit about some of the projects that you worked on? You said that you wrote you wrote something for a lady. So you wrote a show, you wrote a movie.
One of the talk shows I worked on right before COVID or right after COVID, or it's around COVID time, was an adult talk show with April Jones.
Okay.
And we did like 6 episodes, and we were working on selling it to a few other companies. There was some interest. I wasn't head producer for that, so I'm not sure where that got shopped around to. It was a lot of creativity. We had like our structure. I was able to create that structure of that. And our star, April Jones, she was really good about, well, if we said it this way, and she would work with me constantly, making sure we would master the lines on why they said what they said and the pattern, the tone of the show. So that was nice because I got to work and write in someone else's voice and not just create a character for that person to match.
Mm-hmm.
Some other movies I've done Christmas films. I wrote raunchy, dark comedies. I've wrote true stories of like a father and son. I've had some horror thriller films where there's like multi-personalities or schizophrenic. I really like different stories that humans embody, and you don't necessarily know their illnesses or what they were going through, but it kind of is revealed towards the end, the twist.
Okay.
What is your kind of writing process when you're sitting down to write a new story or a new script? What is going through your mind? What do you draw from?
Yeah, tell us all your secrets, all your writing
All
secrets.
my writing secrets. Let's give those away. I'll transition. There's times where I might do some method writing and become that character in order to get into it, and that's usually only if you were to come to me and say like, "Hey, I want to write a story about baseball," and I don't know anything about baseball, but in order to get into that, I will change my diet to a baseball player. I'll start going to get a coach and learn how to play baseball. How to baseball. Clearly, I don't do baseball. And I'll live that life of that kind of player. And then once I feel like that is my daily life, I don't have to think about it so much anymore. Then I go into like interviews, and I'll write down, do as much research as I can on that character and that subject. If it is a story though that's hit and I know that, then I kind of take my time. It's usually around like 2 or 3 weeks, and I stay away from the world, and I just write down all my thoughts and go into how I felt at that moment and what was that story, and really create that character. It's, of course, usually based off of how I felt and myself in that experience. And then it just starts flowing. Like sometimes you do have to sit on a project. If you want to write a project right away, you want to sit down, but you have writer's block. So sometimes you have to sit for a month or 2 months until all of a sudden it just hits you.
Mm-hmm.
It could be in the middle of the night. It could be while you're working. It could be while you're at church or while you are trying to sit and write. But once it hits, just like drop what you're doing and really get into it and just let it flow. Even if it's horrible, you can go back. I've gone back multiple times.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting how you said that you kind of almost go like into a method acting persona to figure out your script and your character. Is that something you think you draw from just from being an actor and that training?
Oh yeah. I mean, I've met method writers, and they go far into it. And that kind of gave me the idea to method write, because I've method acted before. It never occurred to me that I could transition to that to other art forms, to acting. I know a couple of directors that will do it as well if it's a subject they're not familiar with. But that helped me a lot with my writing, knowing like, oh, I can take all these acting techniques that I've worked on and transition that to writing. And it's pretty much the same thing, except for there's not a camera in my face when I'm doing this.
Sure.
So it's a little more freedom. And I mean, there's normal people in my face when I'm doing it, but there's more freedom to just release and become in that character and live that character.
Do you ever feel like you have a hard time to turn it off, at the end of the day?
When I'm done with a script, yes.
Okay.
It still takes me time to transition out. And people that are close with me will know it's like, oh, you're acting different, whether that's me coming out of the character and all of a sudden I'm becoming myself again. They're like, oh, your mood shift. Like there's something different about you right now. Or if it's when I get into that character and they're nosing like, something's off with you. Are you okay? Like, is your day okay? What's going on? It's definitely hard to separate the two. And it takes time to almost like wash yourself of that character or wash yourself of you as you get into that character.
Do you have like a set routine that you kind of go through?
The routine
when you finish a project to kind of unwind?
Depending on the story. If the darker it is, the more I will draw into the people that are very close to me, or I'll go more to church and go back to like my normal standard structure as my life, like wake up, read my devotionals, I go box, I go work out, and then I'll be with the certain people that are in my friend group, and then get back into those auditions. So I'll be very structured to my traditional routine as like Sarah Mae Agnew.
Okay.
And when I'm in that character, my routine's very, very loose. I'm not going to stick to that routine necessarily. That's helped me in the past, but every once in a while, you just kind of have to do what you need to do to get out of that, whatever that may be. Sometimes it's a quick vacation. I'll go back home to Michigan, get out of LA. That helps a lot.
Are those same techniques applied? Like you mentioned writer's block before. Like, what advice do you have for somebody who might have like writer's block, or like what do you do to get yourself like out of that funk and back onto the script?
If I have writer's block, and there's no fun way to get out of writer's block, at least in my experience, is I will write 2 or 3 horrible scenes, or maybe I'll write an entire script that's horrible.
Interesting.
And
like something completely different?
Well, it will usually be on the topic.
Okay.
Like if I'm writing something about cancer, and I just cannot get into this, and I'll write it all out, get all my characters, my storyline. I already have like the base story, flow it through. And then once I have it done, if I'm writing with my partner, I'll have him read it, or I'll go back. I'm like, okay, this was garbage. So delete everything. And I'll delete everything, and I'll sit there and I'm like, okay, so like what worked? Well, clearly this didn't work. So maybe we're going to change this scene to this other scene. And we have to add this character in because that wasn't working. And I have a huge storyboard in my room that has the first act, second act again, third act. And I'll rearrange all the scenes, and that helps me to know, like, okay, I tried it out the traditional way, and what everybody thinks I should have been writing this as didn't work out. So now here's my freedom to do whatever I want to do, and I can just move those note cards all over my wall in order for it to work for what I want to write next.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Yeah, you have to, as a writer, I think you have to be so organized too in some ways. Like
I'm very organized in
chaotic
general,
maybe,
yeah.
but in your own kind of organization.
Chaotic organization.
Yeah.
That's me to a T. That's me.
Well, I guess tell me about that, like development, because that's a skill within itself, to be organized. Like I know we've brought it up in several like occasions, being a musician, being a DJ, having a library, being organized, like that's kind of like, 80% of the gig. So, how have you developed that skill, and like what's that process for you?
Creating the skill of like organization and like how I would write.
Yeah.
I kind of had my own skill set of that. Like I'm already very OCD, and I think I transitioned that from everything I've done in life, where everything's color coordinated. 3 o'clock I do this, 4 o'clock I do this. I have receipts of everything, and it's all marked and organized. But I was able to read a book this past year that kind of helped me get out of that organizational system of being like such a structure,
Mm-hmm.
and transition it a little bit more to like a still structure, but you can change things and be loose, called Save the Cat, which is written by a writer. And he kind of talked about his structure.
I've read that book, yeah.
Have you read that book?
Yeah, I have.
Oh, shoot. I didn't. Have you read that book?
I haven't. Who was the author?
Save the Cat is, now I'm blanking on the author.
Oh, you're
The
gonna
writer.
Save the Cat. I'll have to look it,
Save the Cat.
it up.
We'll look it up. I'll let you know what it is. It's a great book, though. If you should read it for sure. He kind of has his structure that he talks about and says, okay, you need to do this, 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 and this. And then really in the end, he's like, but it's okay if you like switch it because it's horrible. That's okay. Like I switch my stuff all the time. I write great things. I write bad things. And he kind of gives you that freedom and to show you how you can do that and transition into the next thought.
Yeah, that book is where I learned the index card, like having the visual of the board, like the storyboard.
That's what I have.
Uh-huh.
All like color coordinated on my wall of all the acts that I made.
Yeah, yeah. I kind of created like my own like first little story, and like having that visual and that breakdown was like really nice, because then I was able to, if I needed to shift things around or like move them, like I could. It's such like a simple idea, but it's like it can be applied to like everything that you like learn how to do too. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Do you draw a lot when you storyboard, or are you mostly kind of scripting things out, notes and pieces?
I'm big into like minor notes. Like if you go through my phone, it would just be random notes. And if I'm not like still on that subject, I'll go through like a month later. I'm like, what on earth was I trying to write?
I do
with
that
this
too.
like individual phrase. It makes no sense, but in the moment, it's so
It was important.
prolific. Yeah, it's so important. I have to get this down right then. Very few times will I write like pictures or like draw pictures. The only time I do that is if I'm trying to actually picture like, okay, so this is the opening of the movie and I want it to be shot like this, and you come in and you zoom in and you tilt this way, then I'll draw it out, because I'm not a director, so I don't know that proper terminology. So I'll like write it out and then show my friends that are a director. I'm like, how would you film this? Like, give me like the actual terms that you use, and then I'll go back and write it out.
Well, it sounds like you're kind of learning both sides of things. So maybe directing's in your future.
Possibly in the future. I'm not gonna say it's tomorrow, but like it'll happen at some point. I'm very happy mastering writing, acting, producing, but directing one day, that's gonna happen.
Nice.
It's awesome. Yeah, I actually gave like storyboarding like a try one time. I was like writing little like cartoons and like drawing characters and trying to give them like stories. And I think I sent you like a script that I worked on
You
one
did.
time of like a cartoon, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, terrible. I'm sure it was awful. I don't even remember it, but like
I could find it.
Please do.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll find it.
Okay.
I'll find it.
Or delete it.
Or delete it.
Yeah.
After I've seen it.
But I can just remember that process being like very tedious, and like, what you have in your mind is not the easiest to get on paper in a lot of ways, and
It's hard to channel it out.
Yeah.
And put it into words or put it into visuals.
Yeah. So yeah, I really admire that you're able to like take your thoughts and like, like get them down for someone else to read and interpret as their own. I think that's like a really special skill. Like, what advice do you have for somebody that's like trying to like develop that? Not just for me. I'm not asking just for myself, but
I am.
for someone who has something in their head. Like, how do you go from in your mind to on paper? Like, I know we've talked a little bit about your process, but like, can you give any more like insight on that?
I would verbally workshop it as much as possible.
Okay.
And you can start workshopping it with people and like your roommate or your girlfriend, your parents, anybody, and talk it out. And then they'll say like, oh, they're going to say like, oh, that's a really good idea, even though they don't think it's a great idea. They're going to give you a lot of encouragement, which is great. You need some false encouragement.
Sure.
And then go out to a public place, whether that be like the bus stop or coffee shop, and ask someone like, oh, like, do you have like 2 seconds, and pitch it to a complete stranger. And if you can keep their attention for more than a minute, then it's probably a good story and you can write it then. And if you lose their attention and they have to go somewhere else, you have to reworkshop that story or restructure it and figure out why are people losing that connection to what you're saying.
Okay. So yeah, just like pitching it just to random people, you think that's how you can like
I'll pitch it to
gauge
people
whether-
like Target.
Yeah.
I'll go there, complete stranger. We're in line or we're in an aisle and they're like glancing at like some vitamins. I'm like, hey, do you have like a second? And they're thinking I want to ask for a question about where something's at.
Right.
And I capture them, and sometimes I lose their attention. Sometimes they'll stay there and
They're like,
listen to me
who is
for
this
5.
person?
Yeah. It's like, oh,
They may
man.
think I'm crazy.
She's
That
gonna
might
ask
be
me to
a thing.
donate money or something to my volleyball team.
Some people have thought that, yes.
Yeah.
I love that idea though. Just pitching it to a stranger in the end it doesn't really matter what they think.
Not at
You're
all.
not necessarily going to see them again. But there's so many people who would not even have the courage to actually go through and do that.
Yeah.
It's fear of rejection, but they're going to reject me. That's perfectly fine. By the time they wake up tomorrow morning, they're going to forget the crazy person that talked to them, and I'll forget the crazy person that didn't want to talk to me for
Yeah.
more than a minute.
Yeah.
It's fine.
So you brought up some actor influences. You said Leo and you said Meryl Streep. Who are some of the writers that influence you, or directors, or just storytellers in general? Like, where do you capture like influence from?
I really like, and I'm putting this as like a manifestation before he retires. I really like Scorsese.
Yeah.
I love his storytelling and like how out there he's just so direct and in your face about things. He also has a very great structure with how he wants to film things, and he also gives his freedom to his actors in order to do what they want to do. Now, once you do that as an actor, you have to stick with that for the next 50 takes.
Mm-hmm.
But he does give you that freedom, and I love his take and his angles, and he brings art to every single still on that film.
Yeah.
I love his work.
I do hear a lot of actors talking about the fact that he gives them the room and the space to kind of create something that's their own, and he'll let them try, and you know, if it's good, it's good, and if it's not, it's not.
And he'll let you know real quick if it's not good, which is fine. Tell me I'm bad, but the fact that they give them the ability to do something else, because I write something, or if I'm directing something, I have a vision, but everybody is bringing a piece of their vision, and maybe it's not good, maybe it's amazing. They'll see something that I don't see in that clip, or I'm writing it. I write it as me as an actor. Another actor can come in and bring something completely different to the role. I'm like, that's really good. I would have never thought of to put that pause or that twist on that monologue.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, that's art. That's, you know, everyone interprets it different.
Mm-hmm.
Someone could look at the same script and see two different stories.
That's the beautiful thing with it.
Well, let's talk a little bit about like what you're excited for, like the next like couple months. Like you know, can you give us like any projects that you're working on, or like things that you are looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to a couple thrillers that we're working on right now. We have about 3 or 4 written right now. We're also revamping another one for an audio experience, and there's one film specifically, and there's 2 films specifically that were kind of my ideas, and it's a very different take on a very simple subject that I feel like many people in Hollywood have tried to do and try to write about, but it hasn't really hit with the audiences.
Mm-hmm.
And I think taking this different approach to it is very refreshing and will captivate most of the viewers in ways that people aren't expecting, questions that people haven't asked. So there's 2 stories that are thrillers that are heavy with me, like strong on my heart, that I'm excited about.
Cool. And do you have like a favorite like genre? Like you mentioned like drama being like one of your things, but you're dabbling in like all these different things, comedy, thrillers. Do you have like a favorite, like something that you're a little bit more drawn to?
I'm more drawn to, I would say, not necessarily the horrors, the thriller. I like stories that are very true but have a great twist, and that tends to be thrillers. I don't think it has to only be thrillers. I think there are dramas that have great twists, but that's been my draw towards. Not unfortunately, or fortunately and unfortunately, it is in the horror genre, and I can't do demonic for the life of me. I will not do demonic at all. But anything outside of demonic, I absolutely love. I think there's something that everybody can relate to. Everybody's been scared at some point or caught off guard, and I really like tapping into the human mind of that.
Yeah, so like a psychological like thriller, kind of like something that has like
psychological thriller.
It turns around at the end.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
Coming into LA fresh as an actor, and now also being here as a writer, is there any advice you could maybe offer to someone who doesn't really know anything about finding an agent in either field?
I would say, if you really want an agent, a good way to do that is networking, is also doing those. They have like showcases, and it might cost like $30, $40, $50. And they'll have you do a scene or a monologue, and they invite all these agents. And that's a great way to be like seen by all these different agents. Not necessarily sign with them. You can sign with them, which is great. But at least that they're seeing you, and throughout the years, they will recognize you if they like your work and see your transformation as an actor. Or even as a writer, like you can do workshops with writing or put your work into these competitions where people will see your writing if you want to get that agent. I don't think it's necessarily important to get that agent right away. Mm-hmm. I've learned quickly. I've had some very poor agents where they just sign me and then they try to take that 10% of no matter what I earn.
Sure.
And most of my past agents, not all, but most of my earlier agents didn't submit me, or if they did submit me, it would be like one thing. I get all my auditions. So I think it's important to don't focus so much on old Hollywood and how people used to work in Hollywood, because that's not how Hollywood is anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You will need an agent at some point. But when you need that agent, I promise you there's going to be an agent knocking on your door. They're going to be there because there's going to be a paycheck. You're going to have that big role that you need an agent to look over those contracts, and you will find an agent within seconds that will do that because all they have to do is look over the contract for you. You already did the hard work for them. So I wouldn't worry too much about an agency. Focus on your craft. If you do feel like you need an agent, go for it. But either way, I would go out there and do the showcases and put your writing out in the competition so they can get to know you and they see your name and they're going to remember your name. So once it pops up again, they're like, oh yeah, I've seen their work. They're amazing. Yeah, I'll for sure sign with you.
So putting in the work, having the content, and getting your stuff out there, like that's what you would lean toward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
very important.
You kind of said about old Hollywood, new Hollywood. From what it sounds like, you've landed a lot of things and opportunities just from your connections and kind of being in the room and in the right place, being around the right people. Do you feel like that's kind of part of the new system and networking?
At least in my journey, I would say that is a huge piece in that. I did a lot of work, and I'm not saying everybody should do this. Like, everybody should be properly paid for their work. I did a lot of work for free thinking I'm learning.
Sure.
And I can support myself this way, so I can take the time out in order to lend my services and then learn on my way. I understand not everybody can do that. When I did that, as I was learning, I got the connections as well. People would see like, oh, this person, they mess with Sarah. Like, they're cool with Sarah. They're bringing Sarah into the room. If they're cool with her, she's going to be cool with us. And then I made those connections. They might die down, but 2 years later, you see them at something, or they pop up on Instagram and they recognize you. They remember you. Mm-hmm. Hollywood's very small.
Yep. So
when they see your name or they see your face, they're going to remember you. And that's helped me in the past. Anytime I've gotten to a room and they're like, oh, you know so-and-so? I'm like, of course I know so-and-so. Like, I've done this and this. And everybody works with everybody. So don't burn bridges. Put in the work. And I think it's okay in order to put your dues in first and then get it back later.
Yeah, I agree. You know, it's can be a great way, and also to make a good impression with people. Just showing up, being willing to work, willing to learn.
Yeah,
exactly.
Cool, Sarah. So, where can everybody find you at? Give us some socials. Where can we see some of your work?
You can find me at Sarah Mae Agnew on Instagram, and I also have IMDb, which is all my social medias. Everything is Sarah Mae Agnew. So, thankfully, as of right now, I'm the only Sarah Mae Agnew you will find.
All right,
perfect.
And you Google that, that's me.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, thanks for being here on the podcast with us.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. This was great.